those institutions, the gatekeeping institutions, have also revealed themselves as catastrophically flawed in the last 5 to 10 years. I mean, I'm interested in your take on this. Like, you brought up October 7th and the rise of anti-Semitism, and I've been tracking that with a couple of friends of mine, and we've been spending a lot of time fighting it off in all sorts of ways, some of which are public and some of which aren't. And I'm appalled by it. What's happened in Canada on the anti-Semitic front since October 7th is something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. It embarrasses me to the core. My goddamn government came out the other day, those bloody liberals, and they talked in the aftermath of October 7th about combating Islamophobia, as if that's Canada's problem, which it isn't. And so, and then, you saw what happened across the United States and Canada with regard to the universities, Columbia University in particular, and their absolute silence and complicitness while these terrible demonstrations were going on. Not that I think that the demonstrations themselves should have been, well, we can talk about that. Letting terrorist radicals take over the universities doesn't strike me as a very good solution. So I'm curious about what you think about that, because, well, so I think the gatekeepers have abandoned the gates. Like, I don't trust anything the New York Times prints at all. I think they're reprehensible. The universities, I think, are beyond salvaging. I can't see how they can be fixed. Anyways, man, lay it out. Tell me what you think.
I think those, all the way up until those last two statements, I can sign on the dotted line. I think all of these institutions have embarrassed themselves in recent years, and for the reasons that I think you and I would fully agree about. This became most obvious during COVID, but it's, the October 7th is more of the same. But I would just point out that the antidote to that, to the failures of institutions, is not new standards. It's really to apply the old standards. I mean, we need the institutions.
Spoken like a true conservative.
Yeah. Fine. Well, yeah. I mean, so it's but the antidote to failures of science, say, or scientific fraud, is not something other than science. It's just more science, real science, good science, scientific integrity. And so it is with journalism or any academic discipline or anything that purports to be truth-seeking. We have standards, and there's nothing wrong with our standards. What's dangerous about the current information landscape, where we have just this contrarian universe where anything that is outside the institutions is considered to have some kind of primacy, right? Where everyone is kind of a citizen journalist, a citizen scientist, where you just kind of flip the mics on and talk for 4 hours, and that's good enough. What that's selecting for are the people who have no standards to even violate, right? I mean, these people are incapable of hypocrisy. I mean, the one thing that's good about the New York Times and Harvard and any other institution you would point to that has obvious egg on its face at the moment is that at a minimum they're capable of being shamed by their own hypocrisy. And the people who aren't I would agree with you that there's been some institutional capture where we have people in those institutions who just shouldn't be there, right? But we would make that judgment again by reference to these old standards of academic or journalistic integrity. But Candace Owens just doesn't have that, right? And I'm sorry to beat up on her exclusively. I can move to other names if you want, but I mean, it's not.
Principal offender. The reason that I'm not inclined to discuss her isn't because I agree with what she's doing. It's because I think the best way to deal with what she's doing is not to discuss.
Notice her. Okay, but I could say the same thing about Tucker Carlson, right? And you might, whether you agree with me or not, this is my view of him, that he's not in the truth-seeking journalistic integrity business. He's got some other political project that entails spreading a fair amount of misinformation quite cynically and consciously, and smearing lots of people. And in the case of, I don't know how deep his anti-Semitism runs, but in the case of that particular topic, midwifing a very misleading conversation with an amateur historian who he considers the greatest historian working in America today, Daryl Cooper, the podcaster. And, the opinion expressed, again, this is at the highest possible level in our information ecosystem, to the largest audience. Few historians in human history have ever had a bigger audience than Daryl Cooper had on Tucker's podcast, and then quickly followed by his appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast, right? And on that podcast, he spread the lie, the recycled, David Irving point that, the Holocaust was not at all what it seemed, and you wouldn't believe it, but the Nazis really never intended to kill the Jews. They just rounded up so many prisoners in their concentration camps and found that they just didn't have enough food during winter to feed them, and they just were put in this just impossible situation. And might it not seem more compassionate to euthanize these starving prisoners in the end, right? I mean, that's how they accidentally stumbled into the final solution, right? That's what he spread, again, to the largest possible audience. And in Tucker's case, you had a very, I would say, sinister midwifing of that conversation. In Joe's case, he just doesn't know when he's in the presence of recycled David Irving, and is just happy to have a conversation with a podcaster of whom he's a great fan. And but yet he's still culpable for not having done enough homework to adequately push back about what's being said to his audience, which is the largest podcast audience on earth. So it's journalistically, and I know Joe doesn't consider himself a journalist. He considers himself a comedian who's just having fun conversations. Great, but what that is tantamount to at this moment, especially in the context of the worst eruption of anti-Semitism we've ever seen in our lifetimes globally, that's tantamount to taking absolutely no responsibility for the kind of information that is flowing unrebutted into the ears of your audience, right? That's why I got angry at Joe, right? I mean, I love Joe. Joe is a great person. He's completely in over his head on topics of that sort, and it has a consequence. It has an effect.
Well, one of the problems, I suppose, in some ways, Sam, is that in this new information landscape, we're all in over our heads.
Yeah, but some of us are alert to that possibility and worried about it and taking steps to course correct and notice our errors and apologize for those errors.
Okay. Well, let's also try to make a distinction here. I mean, there is a distinction that's important to make between accidentally wandering into pathological territory, and causing disruption because of the magnification of your voice. And there's a big difference between that and exploiting the fringe for your own self-aggrandizement. And there's plenty of the latter online. And I've been concerned for some substantial amount of time that online anonymity also drives that. I mean, you talked about the utility of embodied interaction in separating the wheat from the chaff, right? So one of the things you see online is, as you pointed out, if you have a crazy idea, you can find 300 other people who have even a crazier idea of the same sort, and you can get together with them, which you couldn't have done 20 years ago because there's only one of them per 100,000 scattered all around the world, but they can aggregate together quite quickly online. The places that females gather online, for example, are rife with that kind of pathology, and all sorts of psychogenic epidemics spread without any barrier whatsoever in consequence, because young women in particular are susceptible to psychogenic epidemics. And so that's a huge problem. It's also the case that in real world conversation, if I'm talking to you, it's me. And I have to live with the consequences of what I've said to you, assuming we ever meet again. And I have to live with the fact that other people hear about it as well. But if I'm anonymous, then I can say whatever the hell I want. I can gather the fruits of that, and I can dispense with any of the responsibility. And so my sense is that online connectivity magnifies our voice to a degree that it's virtually impossible to be responsible enough to conduct ourselves appropriately because the reach is just so great.